Hello guys, this is your friend and we are back with a new fanfic. Which is what if Anko awaken a monster inside of Naruto-kun and fall in love with him part 1. And if you enjoy this fanfic then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanfic like this. And now let's start the fanfic. Some say my father was a hero. In the eyes of our people, he was nothing but. In the eyes of our enemy, he was a butcher. He cut down the strong, the weak, and everything in between in the name of peace. The line between life and death is more intimate than we humans realize. They both accrue every day, sometimes at the same time. Hundreds of people are brought into this world and hundreds more leave it, and it's impossible to completely manipulate such things that are the unknown. We, humanity, spend our whole lives trying to do just that, live. We cling to the idea that just existing is enough. Life and death, said to be polar opposites. I see them for what they are though. Mine, my father, Namikaze Minato, hero, or monster. Sometimes, the world doesn't need another hero. Sometimes, what it needs, is a monster. My name is Uzumaki Naruto, and I am a monster. A 6-year-old Uzumaki Naruto lay on his back in the cold dank alleyway that his attackers left him in not 5 minutes ago. He was beaten and broken, so much so that his body felt numb. Good. It was better if he couldn't feel the pain right now. He could somewhat hear the faint noises that the still-going celebration was making in the distance, mocking him with its cheery attitude, completely ignorant of his suffering. After a random man walked right into the young blonde, said man decided, after noticing who it was he bumped into, that he was going to relieve some pent-up stress on the village pariah. At some time during the beating others began to join in. Before it ended there seemed to be at least 10 of them. One boy, one child, against 10 adults, an entire village, an entire world. Yet, the small smile on his face never faded, even as the tears rolled down his cheeks to meet the damp ground. It had rained the day before, he had remembered. He wondered if, hadn't the member of the zoo not shown up, would they have stopped like they did? Would they have kept going until he no longer drew breath? He was curious, was all. He always could feel what others felt. He could feel the pain and rage they experienced when they caught sight of him. Just like how he knew they weren't angry at him, but at the thing inside of him. That never stopped them from projecting their anger on his young body though. Did they ever notice that he never resisted? He didn't understand what exactly he housed in his gut, but he was sure that it was the ire of the village. He'd heard the stories of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the demon that attacked the village a few years ago. He put 2 and 2 together and figured the red-hot and oh-so-angry feeling in his gut was the supposed destruction incarnate. When he calmed his breathing and focused he could feel the massive aura that was the Kyuubi. He would search for something else, anything else within that storm of rage. He understood the feeling he found completely. Loneliness. Naruto had been all alone since he was born. No parents, no friends, nothing. It was a nightmare, except he couldn't wake up. He was stuck. That never kept him down though, because with his innate ability to feel those around him also came the ability to understand them completely. And when you can understand someone completely, you can't help but love them. And Naruto did. He loved his village, his people, with his entire being. He could connect to others on such a level that if someone paid even a sliver of attention to him, they would realize that the boy was capable of feats no other human was able to perform. He, in the simplest way to put it, was doing the impossible, the unthinkable, the amazing. To connect and understand another's feelings and intentions to such a degree that you could practically understand what the other was thinking was as scary as it was incredible. And that was only the beginning of what Naruto could do with his natural talents. Compared to his other skill set, the empathy was just a small drop in a very large ocean. He had never used his other ability on another living being before, but he knew the outcome would be terrifyingly effective. Sighing to himself, the little Uzumaki finally stood, already healed of the beating he had received. If his pain caused others joy, even if only slightly, then he would take it. He was the only person who understood the pain of each individual as much as they themselves did, so it just stood to be true that he would be the only one who could handle their anger. He could and would take it all, the pain, like it was his life's mission. He would do that for his precious village. Dusting off the dirt that now occupied his clothes, Naruto began to walk, where to even he did not know. He felt drawn to something the moment he first stood. Like something, no, someone was calling out for help, calling out for him. They were scared, terrified, and helpless against whatever it was causing their intense fear. It was so strong that it hurt his heart, his soul and whole self. He needed to get to them quickly. He decided to try out an idea he had a few days ago. With the use of his other ability, he thought that it would be possible to run faster than he usually was capable of. Much faster. Pulling in that beautifully bright and unbelievably powerful essence that was all around him, always roaming the world, or was it the world itself? He flooded his body with it to the spilling point. He was now brimming with the unnamed and unknown energy, and he began directing it to his legs. Just like he had thought, his speed doubled. Not enough. He wasn't fast enough, not yet. He forced even more of the energy into his legs, his speed tripling. More. He repeated the process again. His speed quadrupled. Not yet. His speed quintupled. He was so fast everything seemed to be in slow motion. He was no longer visible to the human eye, or any eye for that matter. He suddenly came to a complete halt, like he wasn't traveling fast enough to clear the whole village in seconds. He was directly in the path of someone he had never met, or felt, in his village before now. He was in a different uniform than the shinobi of his village, and his forehead protector was not of the leaf as well. With the foreign energy flowing through his body, Naruto could see perfectly in the dark. The man had white bandages wrapped around the top part of his head, his hitai slanted on his face, completely covering his right eye from the world with a black piece of string holding it all together. He had brown hair, if his brown facial hair was anything to go by. And he was tall, a lot taller than the blonde. Naruto immediately recognized the small form that was held in the man's left arm as the person he felt. He could still feel their fear even now. He wanted to change that, immediately. The man looked down on the small boy in front of him and snarled, "Out of my way, runt." The head ninja of Kumo barked. Naruto was silent for a moment, too angry to even move his body. He had felt the unknown man when he arrived and he now knew his intentions. He was taking what was not his to take. He was condemning an innocent and, what he now knew, gentlest girl he'd ever felt to a life of servitude and abuse. He knew the man thought of her as nothing more than a pawn, a means of reproducing powerful and, if her eyes were anything to go by, special shinobi. Naruto truly despised this man. He was the scum of this earth. Something inside Naruto clicked. He knew what he had to do. He could now feel and understand himself. He knew what he was now. The dark-skinned shinobi vaulted over the child in front of him, knowing that time was against him. He had no time to deal with someone who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. He kept running, making decent distance, until he was stopped once more. Again, the blonde-haired boy suddenly flashed in front of him, almost too fast for him to react to. In the back of his mind, he was worried just how strange it was for someone so young to be so fast. He snarled, and went to grab a kunai from his pouch to dispense with the nuisance. That's when he felt it. Naruto's hand raised into the air, ignoring the man's attempt to bring out a weapon, and began to do the impossible. The world, which was the only way he could describe it, began to twist and turn, producing the same energy that was currently occupying his body. However, now it was different, more refined, sharper, and tangible. From the very air itself, bright golden, the same color as his eyes, particles began to appear, floating in the sky above him. With the flick of his wrist, the particles stirred, slowly rotating, grinding itself in a circular motion, enthusiastically obeying its master's whims. The grizzled man's eyes widened. He didn't exactly know what was happening, but he was able to understand that it wasn't all that good for his health. It was supposed to be dark out, being well past sundown, but with the golden matter that was flying around, the sky was ablaze in a molten gold fury. It briefly passed through the head ninja's mind that, for a moment, it had looked like the heavens themselves opened up to bring forth their wrath on him. It was the most terrifyingly beautiful thing the seasoned Jonin had ever seen. Naruto's hand shot open, spreading his fingers in the air. That's when the particles took form, mimicking his right arm, the spread fingers and all, just in a much larger proportion. It looked like it was the right hand of God more than a small child's anger. Naruto gave one more soul-piercing glare at the man, their eyes meeting for mere seconds. In those chaste moments, the head ninja had thought the boy could actually see his soul for what it was, tainted. He had never felt sheer terror like this before. So why was it so serene? For a moment, the Kumo nin wondered why he wasn't moving, why he wasn't cutting this strange child's throat and vanishing into the night. And then he knew, with a strange, detached realization that he couldn't. Whatever the thing in the sky was, it demanded all his attention. Not even the fear of being caught by the Konoha shinobi could spur him. The Uzumaki could feel the familiar presence of who he guessed was the girl's father. Familiar as in he had felt the man before, he had by now memorized all of Konoha's citizens. He nodded at the man, and the older Hyuga wasted no time to leap forward and scoop his daughter in his arms. Once he leapt back out of the way, Naruto had no reason to wait anymore. In the back of his head he knew he was being watched, he could recognize Hokage Gigi's presence anywhere, and he was always with members of the zoo, so they too he was very familiar with. Especially the lazy-feeling one, he was the blonde's favorite. That didn't matter now though. All that mattered at this very moment was to rid the world of this disgusting man. Like an enraged god bringing down his divine judgment, Naruto clenched his hand in a fist while slamming it down into the ground at his feet, cracking a large portion of it. He unleashed all his anger with a monstrous shout, something that sounded more animal than human. Ah! In a blink of an eye, the gold hand-like structure fell to the earth right above the would-be kidnapper from Kumo with earth-shattering might. All the shinobi present actually had a hard time withstanding the blast, using a large amount of chakra just to stay in place and upright. The power behind the attack had to be equivalent to 20 or 30 explosive tags going off at once. It was a terrifying sight. When the incredible golden light finally faded away, all that was left was a deep scar in the earth. A very deep scar. Naruto stood from his prone form, letting his fist unclench as he did so. No one said a word, no one moved a muscle, and everyone tried to hold their breath. Silence reigned supreme in the now very large street as everyone just stared at the boy in disbelief. Not only did the demon child completely and utterly overpower and decimate the head ninja of Kumogakure no Sato, but he did it with ease, without the help of his charge, and for the sake of another Konoha citizen. It was incredible, it was amazing, and it was unbelievable. Everyone tensed as the village pariah moved forward, towards the Hyuga clan head and heiress. When he was standing right next to the man, Naruto gave him a gentle and warm smile, already able to feel the man's gratitude and unafraid feelings. That made Naruto happy, someone appreciated him. Is she okay, mister? Naruto asked softly, his gentle smile never leaving his face. Hyuga Hiyashi gave a smile himself, something not many were privileged to see, ever, and nodded. It would seem so. I have you to thank for that, Naruto-san, the Hyuga man replied, still holding his firstborn. I am forever in your debt. Naruto shook his head. I'm just glad she's okay. Hiyashi nodded. As am I. Sarutobi Hiruzen landed next to Naruto and gave the boy a questioning look. We need to talk, Naruto-kun, were the only words that left the aged Hokage's mouth before he Shunshin's body flickered away, taking the blonde with him. As Naruto sat in the chair across the Hokage in the man's office, he felt no fear. He already knew what the man was going to ask. And he was going to answer with a smile, because he knew he had done the right thing. He had saved an innocent, and was proud of it. That made him a hero. He had taken another's life, and enjoyed it. That made him a monster. Whatever others saw him as didn't matter now though. He had found a way to feel. He felt alive. He felt free. He was finally awake. A deity is supposedly something divine, and as such should be judged by their ability to create and heal. Yet, we mortals judge the potency of a god's strength by their power to destroy and end. It's silly, really, if you think about it. The more a god is monster-like, the more people pay attention to it. Such absurdity is favorable to a person like me though. I don't yet have the power to heal, or create, but something I do have is the power to destroy. The power to end anything as I see fit. The only difference between me and a deity is simple. I know what I am. I am a monster. So the zoo was nothing like what Naruto thought it would be. Most of the people were of the silent type, which was something he was okay with, having people ignore him for most of his life, which, in hindsight, was only 6 years, so he didn't really have all that much experience. After the little chat he and the Hokage had after he terminated the Kumo shinobi, the old Sarutobi had decided that it would be best if Naruto put his abilities to good use. That came in the form of joining the zoo, or what he now knew to be the Anbu Black Ops. They were the Ansatsu Senjutsu Tokushu Butai, the Special Assassination and Tactical Squad. That night was the best thing that ever happened to the blonde. Until the last word spoken by his now senpai. Flashback. Naruto could feel what the Hokage was feeling, anxiety. He had seen a boy of only 6 years annihilate with extreme prejudice the head ninja of Kumo. The man was the ambassador of peace for the cloud, and he was a strong jonin in his own right. The fact that Naruto had done away with him with what looked like ease made him very uneasy. Gigi, I can feel what you're thinking, just ask. I'll tell you the truth, honest. Naruto finally broke the awkward silence in the Hokage's office. The poor man was pacing the very moment they appeared in the small room. How can you feel what I'm thinking? Hiruzen asked, baffled that the boy was claiming to have the ability to read minds. Were his thoughts not safe now? When the Uzumaki laughed, the Lord Third felt like he was the child. I can't exactly hear your thoughts, Gigi, that's impossible. Naruto admitted. It's kind of hard to explain. The blonde trailed off, rubbing his chin with his right hand. It's like I'm connected to, well, everything. That's the only way I can describe it. At his grandfather figure's confused expression, Naruto explained a little better. When people are upset, I can tell. Naruto elaborated. And not just tell, but tell why. He continued, trying his best to describe what he could do. And how long have you been able to do such a thing? And why did you say everything instead of just people? The Sarutobi asked, wanting more. For how long? It's been since I could remember, he said, still rubbing his chin. For why I said what I did, that's because it's not just with people. Animals and plants, really anything, as long as it's living. I guess I could say I'm connected with life. Here, Sarutobi noticed Naruto's eyes widen. What is it, Naruto-kun? His voice was riddled with fear. Naruto gave him a sheepish look. It's nothing, Gigi, I've just never thought about it that way is all. Maybe that's the best way to describe it. His closed hand met his open palm. Yeah, I'm connected with life. The Lord Third sighed. The boy was going to give him a heart attack. So how can you tell what others are feeling? I'm not really sure, Naruto admitted, but I can do it. He finished with a wide smile. The Hokage nodded, trying to process what he was hearing. And the golden matter you used on the Kumo nin. That was what Hiruzen wanted to know the most about. If he had to guess, that was an A-rank technique. Most grown adults didn't have the ability to even use such high-rank techniques, never mind create new ones. The last time an A-rank technique was developed, it made its creator a legend. The copy nin was a man known far and wide. Yet, here he was, only 6 and already so far ahead of all those before him. It was unnerving to think that such raw talent and power was in the hands of such a young child. Oh, that, Naruto's smile grew, if that was even possible. I made it up. Hiruzen couldn't help but smile at Naruto's enthusiasm. What exactly was it? He needed to be the Hokage right now, not the boy's surrogate grandfather. Naruto chuckled awkwardly. Don't really know that either. Sarutobi sighed. Did the boy know anything about his own abilities? The way he could use them said he did, but that, surprisingly, was not the truth. Can you tell me anything about it? Anything at all? He asked, needing to know what the boy knew. Naruto nodded. Yeah, I can describe how I do it. When Hiruzen nodded, the boy continued. There's this kind of feeling in the air, like a constant energy that's always around me. I don't know why others can't feel it and I can, but I do know that it's there. He can't mean natural energy. The Hokage thought to himself. There's no way someone could be born able to feel it, right? When his Gigi didn't reply, he continued. When I need it, I can pull the energy into myself. When I do, a lot of stuff happens. He held up one finger. My body becomes tougher. 2 fingers, I get a whole lot stronger. Like yesterday, I lifted an entire tree out of the ground. 3 fingers, I get faster. I think I can outrun anyone in this whole village. Sarutobi highly doubted that. There were a lot of fast ninja in Konoha, but he didn't voice his thoughts. 4 fingers. I can feel others more, and farther away, too. Hiruzen's eyebrows climbed up into his hairline. This kept sounding more and more like natural energy by the minute. 5 fingers. And I can control and shape the energy around me. That's the gold dust stuff you saw forming the arm. Now that did not sound like something any sage the Hokage ever heard of being able to do. Naruto-kun, I believe you were born with the amazing ability to use natural energy, something only a sage is capable of doing. Hiruzen informed with a smile on his face. There is only one other person in this world that can use the sage arts, and that's my pupil, Jiraiya. Naruto shot up out of his seat. You mean I can use the same power as one of your students? He half asked, half yelled, excitement evident in his voice. Hiruzen nodded. It would seem so. But whereas he had to be taught the sage arts, you were born able to use them. Another smile ghosted the elderly man's lips. It's truly remarkable. Naruto nodded, a 1,000-watt smile plastered to his face. So what now, Gigi? He asked, eager to learn more. Hiruzen thought on it for a moment. What was he going to do with the boy? He definitely needed to contact Jiraiya and have him come home. He needed to know of this mind-blowing discovery. He also wanted to train the boy. He knew he would become someone more powerful than even his father. Having a hand in teaching such a person would be a gift in and of itself. Throwing him into the academy would be a shame. His talents would be wasted in that environment. What could he do? An idea began to form. With a snap of his fingers, a man dressed in black clothing, gray armor, and a white face mask, a member of the zoo, appeared from within the shadows. It wasn't a surprise to Naruto, having felt the man's presence the moment he arrived shortly after them. He knew the man as the lazy one, his favorite zoo member. The shock of gravity-defying silver hair just confirmed this. Inu, do you think you have room in your cell for one more? It was worded as a question, but it wasn't intended as one. When the god of shinobi spoke, you listened, no matter what you were asked of. Discreetly, of course. No one besides you will know his true identity, and only your team will know that he's even in Anbu. He added, never taking his eyes off of the Uzumaki. Naruto could feel the man's reluctance, and was intrigued that it didn't come in his dislike of either his age nor his burden, but something else, something personal. Why did the lazy one care for him? After the split-second hesitation, the dog-styled masked nin saluted his Hokage, giving the aged warrior an affirmative, yes, sir, before turning his gaze to the blonde. It won't be easy, Inu began in a hard and firm voice. He then gave off the feeling of warmth and protectiveness, Kahai. Naruto gave a warm smile and nodded as fast as he could. I'll do my best, Inu-senpai. And with that said, Naruto could already feel the great things he was going to do with Inu. It will be tough, Naruto-kun, but I believe you can do it. I think you will be able to protect Konoha better than anyone else. The Hokage said warmly, his smile showing his pride for his successor's child. This was it. Welcome to the Anbu Black Ops. He would finally be able to do what he wanted the most, protect Konoha. Nezumi Kahai. Wait. What? End flashback. Apparently, Anbu operatives were given their codename by their captain, and Inu just happened to be Nezumi's captain. Well, he was going to be Nezumi's captain once he received all of the required training. Couldn't have someone out in the field that didn't know what they were doing. When he asked why he was dubbed Nezumi, Kakashi replied with, "Because you're tiny." A tick mark appeared on the blonde's forehead, like a mouse, he added, and was met with silence, small. Nezumi sighed. That was okay with Nezumi, he was only 6, he had time. All he had to do now was survive Inu's hell school, whatever that meant. It shouldn't be too hard. He was happy, and nothing could change that. Nezumi was miserable. If there was such a place as hell, Nezumi thought that it sounded like a nice place to vacation to. Hell school was painful and exhausting, physically, emotionally and spiritually. What the hell was wrong with his captain? Was he a sadist? That would actually explain a lot. Nezumi was currently sprawled out on his rock-hard bed, having moved into the Anbu headquarters the day after he talked to the Hokage and Inu Senpai about joining the zoo, which just happened to coincide with his 7th birthday. It was required of all agents to live within the Black Ops building. At first, Nezumi wasn't all that thrilled about the idea, but now, after 6 months of the place, he didn't even notice anymore. He chalked it up as just another thing he had to do for his village. Today had been a particularly painful day. His ability to manipulate natural energy was incredibly advanced, and the only person that could help him further his prowess with that was still not available. The Toad Sage was the kind of person who was very hard to find if he didn't want to be found. Apparently he didn't want to be found at the moment. Month 1 and 2. His training consisted of the usual required Anbu material, which included a whole lot of studying. Anbu had to have a certain level of knowledge in both foreign and domestic affairs. Nezumi found that he wasn't the biggest fan of books. But he did as he was told nonetheless, accomplishing everything Inu threw his way. The second month he had been personally trained by the Hokage in the ways of running a village. There was a lot of politics and other boring stuff involved, but Nezumi soaked it all up. He planned on becoming the greatest Hokage, the likes of which Konoha has never seen. He really wanted to feel free and awake again. The only way he could do that was if he was protecting his village, his people. Month 3. Another huge section of his training consisted of learning other shinobi skills. Inu had told him that he needed to be more versatile. A one-trick pony, whatever the hell that meant, was something he didn't want to be. Inu, who was now more of his sensei than anything, first taught him how to climb trees. Without his hands. That was something he actually enjoyed doing. And it only took 10 minutes. Inu Senpai, after a long and detailed lesson on chakra and chakra control, explained to him that it seemed that he had abnormally amazing chakra control. Such a level of precision was something apparently only Tsunade, who happened to be another Sannin he shared something with, could accomplish. Senju Tsunade was the medical nin, and he was up to par with her when it came to control. He put that in the back of his head for later: versatility, versatility, versatility. After the tree walking exercise, Inu Senpai taught him to do the same thing, but on water. That, too, was incredibly fun. It also only took 10 minutes. Deciding that he needed to throw more difficult things at the boy, he began teaching him the Shunshin body flicker, which took a little longer for the boy to learn. This time it took 15 minutes. This was starting to intrigue Inu. The boy had said that he could understand everything so long as it was alive. That made Inu start to question, were jutsu alive? Because if so, Nezumi was capable of understanding any and all techniques, as long as they were performed within his sensory area. That was impossible though. The only technique he heard of that could understand jutsu like that was implanted in his left eye, the Sharingan. If it was true, just what were the boy's limits? Did he have any? The thought began to make more and more sense. Nezumi was incredibly mature, far, far from anything a now 7-year-old should be. He was able to speak like an adult, see things from an adult's point of view, and understand the adult world. So, how did he do it? Inu had never been one to believe that age brought wisdom. He had known a lot of unwise, elderly people. He personally thought that experience brought wisdom, which was not the same thing. You could live your entire life ignorant if you were sheltered or reclusive. Obviously, though, a 7-year-old, no matter how hard their life may be, did not have the required experience to be so wise in the ways of the world. Something else allowed him to be so mature. That something had to be his empathy ability. If he could truly understand others, then he had to have started understanding their feelings. Learning about love, hate, jealousy, greed, lust, joy, sorrow, and everything in between must have been the strangest thing for someone so young. That was the only explanation Inu could come up with on how a mere child could comprehend the emotions that he was able to feel. It was impossible, but that just made it even more special. The rest of the month he had used to come up with a name for the tangible natural energy he used. Month 4. Nezumi was then taught Shuriken Jutsu. That took up a lot of his time. It was hard for him to throw the kunai at first because his hands were so small. After Inu taught him a trick that he used to do when he was young, apparently he was a young prodigy as well, that involved his chakra he caught on fast enough. Month 5. The next thing Nezumi had to learn was stealth. He was a little nervous about it at first, but after a couple of weeks he got the hang of it. Then it was kenjutsu training. After the first day, Inu thought he had finally found something the kid wasn't good at. He realized how wrong he was a week later. The cut on his back still stung from that. Month 6. As of late, Nezumi learned a lot of ninjutsu, finding it to be his favorite. With his perfect chakra control, learning genjutsu was too easy, and his taijutsu was still developing. With the natural energy flowing in his body, he didn't even need to actually land his strikes on his target. Ninjutsu, however, interested Nezumi the most. With his sage dust techniques, which he now called the gold natural energy he could manipulate, he was already ahead of most jonin when it came to power. But he couldn't solely rely on it, one-trick pony and everything. So the Hokage and Inu began to teach him elemental ninjutsu. The blonde's affinities were wind and fire, which also was special. He didn't have a Kekkei Genkei bloodline limit, not really, so the fact that he already had 2 affinities that complemented each other, was amazing. That's why the Uzumaki was so exhausted at the moment. Inu Senpai knew a lot of ninjutsu, as did the Lord Third, and they was making sure to drill as many into Nezumi as possible. His body was sore and limp, and he loved every moment of it. It reminded him that he was gaining the strength to do what was needed to be done. Things were going to change when he got out of these walls. Konoha's enemies would think twice before striking. Her people would know peace. Nezumi would be a hero. Even better, Nezumi would be a monster. It had been a whole year since he joined the zoo, and Nezumi had finally been cleared, field ready. He was nearing 8 now, and he was a certified member of the Anbu. He was nervous now though. Today was the day he met the rest of Captain Ini's team. He understood Inu's words when he said it would take the team a while to warm up to him. He was the youngest Anbu agent the elemental nations had ever seen. The others just needed to be positive that they could rely on him to watch their backs. They could. Inu had been extremely happy that he and the blonde were the same, patriots to the core, but still cared about the lives of their fellow citizen above all else. When Kakashi told him that those who abandoned the mission were considered trash, but those who abandoned their friends were worse than trash, Nezumi loved the saying so much that he asked if he could live by it as well. Kakashi, of course, said yes. He didn't even have to ask. The rate at which the blonde was able to learn and process, well, anything, was amazing. Inu didn't know of anything the boy couldn't do. He thought Nezumi was strong at first, but after Jiraiya had finally shown up, Inu prayed he never defected. Having to fight that would be bad for anyone's health. They'd die, plain and simple. He wasn't invincible though, and Inu was happy that the blonde realized that. Anyone could fall when arrogant or outnumbered. Nezumi took a deep breath. Here we go, he whispered, pushing through the double doors of Team Ro's designated lounging area. He was immediately met with stares. There was a small boy in a standard Anbu uniform and they didn't like where this was going. The Uzumaki agent took in his surroundings for a moment. The room was of medium size and Spartan. All there was were gray walls and 3 very large black couches. The couches were set up so that they were connected, and a long glass table was centered in the middle of them. Ah, Nezumi Kahai, you made it. Inu called out over the palpable silence. Come here, I'll introduce you to everyone. Nezumi gulped, but obeyed nonetheless. Yes, sir. When the blonde made it to his captain, Inu put a hand on his shoulder. Everyone, I'd like you all to meet Nezumi. He's going to be assigned to Team RO for a while. No one said anything, but they didn't have to. Nezumi could feel what they thought of him. Great, we're stuck with some brat. What is the Hokage thinking? Hey, isn't that? No, it couldn't be. That last one almost made Nezumi flinch, but he stayed composed. I hope we can work well together. The blonde bowed. Inu cleared his throat. Right, well, let's report to Hokage-sama. I think it's about time for the newbie to take on his first mission. Nezumi gulped. 2 months. It had been 2 months since he joined Team RO and they still treated him like trash. He was officially the team's censor and not a frontliner, which is what he wanted to be, and the missions they carried out had little use for his abilities. He did spot an enemy ambush 2 weeks ago, but apparently that wasn't something that warranted much respect. He had been training for so long and he still couldn't wake up. It was somewhat annoying. Nezumi was currently sprinting through the forests that occupied the border of Hai no Kuni and Tsuchi no Kuni with Tora and Usagi, 2 of the people who disliked him the most. Inu Taicho said that if he worked with them more that they would have to warm up to him sooner or later. Nezumi highly doubted that but followed orders all the same. The 3 of them were doing a simple border patrol, making sure everyone stayed in their own countries. Simple enough, right? Nothing was ever simple. Nezumi signaled to the 2, stopping their fast-paced travel. What is it, kid? Tora asked, annoyed that the blonde was holding them up. 2 people are headed right for us. He signed in Anbu code. They aren't friendly either. He took another second to analyze the incoming shinobi, trying to understand what it was he was feeling. His eyes widened. Shit, he whispered, causing his comrades to take defensive stances. What they heard in his voice made them wary. What was going on? They must have felt me as well, the blonde thought to himself. If Tora and Usagi die because of me. Get out of here you 2, Nezumi whispered. His tone was serious. The only female of the group, Usagi, spoke up. Look kid, no matter how special you think you are, you can't just order your senpais around. She was giving off an annoyed emotion, Nezumi could tell. You're still just a brat. The blonde sighed. Were these people ever going to show him respect? So far Inu was the only person to welcome him into the fold. Usagi-senpai, there are 2 Jinchuriki on their way from the direction of Tsuchi no Kuni. He informed them. They have probably felt my biju's presence and decided to investigate. He could feel their fear. Don't worry. They're here for me, not you. He tried to calm them. Go. If I don't return, then Konoha will know where they stand with Iwa. He felt their disbelieving minds. You're going to sacrifice yourself for us? Tora asked, astounded. It was no secret that both he and Usagi hated Nezumi, so why the hell was he doing this? Why? The 2 Anbu's hearts almost broke when he took his mask off and smiled at them, of all things. Because we're comrades. You'd do the same for me if it was the other way around. Nezumi sometimes wished he couldn't feel people's hearts. No we wouldn't. Nezumi steeled himself. Anbu didn't cry. Now go, he repeated, this is my fight. And with that, he turned around and took off in the direction of the fast approaching Iwanin. It was a warm and sunny day, the complete opposite of what it should have been. He was sacrificing himself for people who didn't even see him as a person. He just couldn't bring himself to care though. This was it. Time to wake up. It had taken hours to regroup with Inu Taicho and the rest of the squad, but when Usagi and Tora explained what had transpired earlier in their border patrol, they regretted it. You're worse than trash now. Inu's cold voice hit Tora and Usagi like an enraged tsunade. How could you just leave him to die like that? The worst part about it was that he wasn't even yelling at them. He was speaking in a soft and very scary voice. But Usagi tried to defend herself but couldn't think of anything to say. They had abandoned someone who truly cared for them. They knew of his abilities to feel almost what others thought. He must have known what their response was to his attempt to establish a bond. The two ANBU's hearts almost broke when he took his mask off and smiled at them of all things. Because we're comrades, you'd do the same for me if it was the other way around. Nezumi sometimes wished he couldn't feel people's hearts. No, we wouldn't. They didn't get the chance to speak again. Inu was gone, out to look for his wayward Kahai. Minutes after Usagi and Tora left, Nezumi, no, he was Naruto now, he was awake, was face to face with two S-class Jinchuriki. They had taken countless lives, Konoha Nin included, and had years to tame the beasts within. Naruto was 8, and the only time he had interacted with his charge they didn't even speak. Unfortunately for them, that was enough. Flashback. When the old pervert finally made it to Konoha, Naruto was put to work right away, and not just in senjutsu. Jiraiya-sensei had been adamant that Naruto try and establish a link between him and the Kyuubi. Naruto didn't mind so much as he just didn't know how. Just relax, the Toad Sage told him, calm yourself and visualize what you want. Naruto sighed. What exactly was it that he wanted? Jiraiya had said that he was Konoha's Jinchuriki, and even though he didn't like it personally, his fellow Sennin told him that he needed to learn how to harness the Biju's power. Of course Naruto wanted to protect Konoha, but he felt guilty just taking what was not his. Didn't he kill a Kumo Nin for that? So what did he want? Deciding to just wing it and come up with an answer later, Naruto dived into his own mind. It was a wet, dark, and broken place. So nothing unusual. A long corridor, what looked like an underground sewer of sorts, stretched out from both behind and in front of him. Water dripped from the ceiling and the walls were cracked. Did he mention that he was knee-high in something he hoped was water, because he was? He chose to walk forward, might as well, and he began to regret his choice. It felt like hours had passed since he arrived and everything seemed to be the same, never changing, dingy hallways. That's when he came upon the large room that doubled as a cell on the far side, a very, very large cell. The metal bars, adorning a large tag that read, "Seal," reached into the darkness that was above them, lost in the expanse that was his mind. For a long drawn-out moment, everything was still. He began to think nothing was beyond those figurative bars, until a single, red-slitted eye peered through the darkness, capturing the small boy in its gaze. Before, when Naruto tried to feel the mass in his gut, he only ever felt hatred or malice, and at times, loneliness. Now, standing so close to the famed monster, he seemed almost calm. Naruto smiled. Was his soothing natural energy relaxing the all-powerful Biju? Whatever the case may be, Naruto was certain that the Kyuubi could feel him as well, like he too had the ability to read emotions. Naruto never felt so close to another in all his life. They were the same, in more ways than one. They were both scorned by the world. They were both the definition of strong. They were both forced upon each other. They were both too different than what people were comfortable with. And by far the most important and startling similarity was that they were both monsters. Standing proud and tall, not against the misunderstood Biju, but beside him, was thrilling. There was no need for words. Everything was being said through their eyes. I'm sorry for what's happened to you. I know. I'm going to save you. I know. I'll need your help. The visage that was the Kyuubi morphed into the terrifyingly wicked grin that stalked the nightmares of so many. I know. End flashback. Naruto wasn't sure why Team RO felt so awestruck when he returned to the village the next morning. He's in tattered and scorched rags, a sure sign of battle. Even Usagi and Tora felt like they were relieved and happy. His face mask is nowhere to be seen and he's covered head to toe in soot. That was strange, but Naruto was never one to look a gift horse in the mouth. What happened to you out there? Still, he was disappointed in himself. One got away. Kakashi stored his observations away for after what was to come. Before he could think more on that line of thought, Tora and Usagi approached Naruto. He wasn't awake anymore, he was Nezumi now. The two approached Nezumi with a small bit of trepidation in their step. No, he didn't want them to fear him. That's when he realized it. We apologize for being worse than trash, Nezumi Kahai. They both shouted simultaneously, their heads lowered in a deep bow. They weren't afraid of him, they were upset with themselves for abandoning a teammate. They accepted him. Nezumi's heart jumped. Was it finally that time? Was he now noticed as important? If you have it in you to forgive us, we promise to treat you with the respect you deserve. Usagi begged. I would be proud to work alongside such an amazing comrade. Tora added. That was it, the word he was waiting, craving to hear. It was that time after all. He was finally a part of Konoha, small as it may be. He was being recognized as a comrade and not someone not even worth the oxygen he consumed. Nezumi chuckled. You guys look silly bowing your heads to an 8-year-old. Usagi and Tora raised their heads. Of course I'd like to work with you. Here he spread his arm out, motioning to the rest of the members, all of you, if that's okay. The smile on his soot-covered face was all the gathered members of Team RO needed to break into cheers of approval. The kid was all right in their book. Naruto could feel it, all of the accepting hearts and minds of his team. It was almost too much to handle. Almost. Nezumi, you need to be debriefed. Inu Taicho spoke above the yelling. The Hokage needs to know what happened during the time you were Mia. The cheers died down, but the emotions still filled the air, and that was enough. Nodding to his captain, Nezumi headed for the exit, intent on following the silver-haired man. Before he could make it out of the door though, Usagi called out his name, causing him to stop and turn to the woman. Yes, Usagi-senpai, he asked, a gentle smile stuck to his face. Damn, he really needed to work on his poker face. I forgot to say this before but, she paused, looking back at Tora who nodded at her. Thank you, and welcome to the Anbu. She crooked her mask to the side slightly so that only he could see what lay underneath. Dark onyx eyes that complemented her long dark hair, a small nose, luscious lips, and an altogether pretty face, and planted a small kiss on his cheek. The room lit up in O's and Nezumi's face went a deep scarlet. He was also pretty sure he had an incredibly stupid grin plastered to his face too, but he didn't care. That was awesome. He did it. He was now officially a member of the zoo. Having heard the happenings that his newest operative explained, in great detail, about the death match he had with two people he was unfortunately familiar with, had the Lord Third Hokage nervous. Seeing the subsequent head of Yoden no Roshi laid out on his desk, unsealed from the scroll said operative put it in after he managed to defeat and kill the powerful man scared him further. What couldn't this boy accomplish? Gigi, about the Yonbi, the soot-covered blonde even looked nervous here, we need to talk. His eyes dragged over to where he could feel the ever-present Anbu watching their leader closely. In private, his voice was riddled with concern. Great. What now? A war zone is a place someone like me can thrive in. Opposing sides fight to the death to claim the victory. Everyone on the opposite side is fair game, all of them must die. Monsters like me are the star players in the game that is war. It's a place we can feel alive, free, awake. I never thought I would have the privilege to not only witness one of these ridiculous bouts, but help bring about the fall of the very person who started one. I'm elated that I was wrong. Greetings war-torn Mizu no Kuni, a monster has arrived to set you free. Me. The shores that made up the coast of Mizu no Kuni were heavy with fog. The sun was nowhere in sight, and the air was thick with moisture. It felt like it could rain any minute now. The small fishing village the four-man cell arrived at was said to belong to the resistance. The war between them and the Lord Fourth Mizukage was heavily reliant on territorial dominance. Mizu no Kuni was made up of several islands, all centering the country's hidden village, Kurigakure no Sato, which was currently in the hands of the tyrant known as Yagura. The man was leading a crusade to purge the bloodline users from Mizu. It was said that he thought them to be too dangerous to let live, so decided to kill his own people out of fear. Hundreds of thousands had already been slaughtered, and many more still lived in fear of his genocide. The other nations all decided to stay out of Mizu's business, letting them handle their own domestic affairs. The bloody and crippling civil war finally reached the Land of Fire's citizens, in a way. A small scientific expedition into the waters that bordered Hai no Kuni and Mizu no Kuni turned into a massacre. The group of 6 civilian scientists, not a shinobi in sight, was captured by the Mizukage's forces and executed on the false charges of espionage. Konoha received their heads a week later, courtesy of the Mizukage himself. Yugura was a fool, because now Konoha had him in her sights. She cried for his blood, and his blood she shall be given. The Mizukage was playing a dangerous game by poking the sleeping dragon that was the god of shinobi's wrath. That's why the Lord Third ordered a small contingent of Rohan to join the resistance and strike at Yugura directly. Taking a deep breath of the cold, salt air-riddled afternoon air of the shoreline, Nezumi glanced at the captain of their newest assignment, Neko Senpai. The woman had long beautiful purple hair, and that was all that Nezumi knew about the cat-masked operative. She was an Anbu through and through. She never took her mask off, at least since he joined the Corps 2.5 years ago. Nezumi knew better though. She was a warm person and thought the same as he and Inu Taicho. The team was just as important as the mission. That made it easier for him to suddenly be under her command. To his left was the official, youngest Anbu agent in Konoha, Karasu, his best friend. The crow-masked operative joined the fold half a year after the little incident that caused Team RO to finally accept him. It came to no surprise to Nezumi that Karasu entered the Black Ops. The things the blonde felt coming from the young Uchiha amazed even him. He was strong, obviously, but his mind and heart made Nezumi instantly want to befriend him the moment he walked into Rohan's changing room. Being the closest to him in age was a factor too. After a few missions together, the two became quick friends and were usually paired together. Team RO had been a little more accepting when the 10-year-old joined. After working with an 8-year-old juggernaut made sure they'd never judge someone by their age again. Crouching next to Karasu was the newest member of Rohan, Saru. It was strange, first Karasu, and now Saru called him Nezumi-senpai. He was too embarrassed to refer to them as Kahai though. He was only 10 now. They were both at the very least 2 years older than him. Saru had shown a lot of respect to Nezumi right away, and that confused him greatly. The monkey-masked man had explained that he was somewhat of a celebrity among the younger operatives at HQ, even if it was just a rumor. A child with the strength of an entire army was what they described him as, and some even said that he was invincible. Nezumi was less than pleased about the rumors. His status as an operative was top secret. He was the Hokage's personal shadow, a silent defender. He didn't mind fame, but his Hokage had wanted him to be a whisper, not a poster boy for the village. They had Itachi for that. Of course, Saru was in his mid-20s, but that was apparently young enough to look up to the legend that was slowly coming forth. His thoughts were interrupted. Nezumi, find the resistance, we need to meet up with them and explain Hokage-sama's orders. Neko spoke, giving her first order as a captain. Nezumi nodded, already doing what he was told. The village was small and not a lot of people resided in it. That made it incredibly easy to lock onto the strong chakra signatures that he was sure belonged to the resistance. Done. They're not far from here, just northeast of this position, 10 minutes I'd say. Nezumi replied, waiting for the next orders to be given. Lead the way, she said, confident in his abilities. Having worked with the young blonde for the better part of 2 years made her a firm believer that he was in a league far out of her reach. She was just glad that he was letting her run the show. Someone else that knew that they were the greater would have given her trouble during the entire assignment. That's why she respected Nezumi. He was far from arrogant and loved to cooperate with his team, always listening to orders and offering help whenever it was needed. Yes, Captain. And with that, he took off in the direction of the higher-than-average chakra signatures, leading the cell for the short duration. He took in the sights of the village as he raced across it. There were a lot of shops, and the ground of the shopping district was made of cobblestone, different. The people here looked so sad, and the young Anbu operative could feel their suffering. Good. Now he had more of a reason to fulfill his Hokage's orders. Yagura had to die. Like he said, it only took 10 minutes before they reached a seemingly random hut at the edge of a dock. Nezumi knew better. He could feel the shinobi below them. No one could escape his sensing capabilities. He was the greatest sensor in the village after all, able to feel the emotions and intentions of anyone in his range, which was incredibly large. Nodding to Neko, the mouse-masked boy fell back, allowing the woman to take the lead again. Stretching her arm out to rasp against the wooden door, she was cut off by a burly man with long black hair. State your business, Konoha Nin. I've done nothing wrong, and you have no jurisdiction in this part of the world. His voice was gruff, matching his appearance perfectly. The scar that ran across the bridge of his nose reminded Nezumi of a chunin he knew to work at the academy. He didn't know the man's name, but he knew that if he went to the academy, he would want that man to be his instructor. He had a good heart. Neko chose her words carefully. We've come on the behalf of the Lord Hokage. We have jurisdiction anywhere we so please. She gave the man a respectful nod of her head. Konoha wishes to help wash away the red from the waters. We're here to clean house. There it was. The code the resistance used to identify friendlies. That little piece of information was invaluable to them. Without it, the resistance wouldn't have let them anywhere near their plans. What they say about Jiraiya must be true. The man was a master spy. Wait here for a moment, was the man's reply, disappearing from the door to enter the small shack. 5 minutes later, the man returned and ushered them into the hut, which would have looked strange to onlookers. The hut looked like it could only fit 2 of them in at the same time. The hut itself was just a ploy, what lay underneath it was the true hideout. The underground tunnel was very large. An experienced Doden user must have had a hand in creating it. The tunnel stretched out for a small distance, which led out in an even larger room. There were people scurrying about like worker bees. Nezumi chuckled, it was like a hive. So that must mean the absolutely beautiful woman with long, auburn hair sitting at the very large table in the center giving him a predatory glare like he was her prey was the queen. This should be fun, he thought to himself before joining Neko and the rest of the team in making their way to the obvious leader. The smirk on her face kind of excited Nezumi. So, Konoha finally decides to send assistance and all we get are 3 Anbu. She shook her head in mock hurt. I'm disappointed. 4. Neko spoke, you've been given 4 Anbu to your cause. Ah, but you're wrong, sweetheart, she retorted. The children only count as half an Anbu. Her smile was still as sweet as it had first been. So I've been given 3, such a shame too, I really could have used the help. Saru decided to speak on behalf of Karasu and Nezumi. You're going to eat those words later on, beautiful. Nezumi sighed. Saru was always hitting on women. Even now, in a foreign country and in the presence of what the blonde could feel to be a powerful kunoichi. The woman's predatory smirk intensified. Yup, Nezumi definitely liked this one. Oh, now I just can't wait to see what the youth of Konoha is capable of. She almost sounded genuine, but she couldn't escape Nezumi's abilities. No matter how good of a liar she was. Our Hokage has given us orders to shadow the resistance and assist in any and every way possible. Our goal is to get Yagura alone with Nezumi here. She informed the woman, gesturing to the smallest member of the cell. A delicate eyebrow rose on the beautiful woman's face. And why would your Hokage wish to have a child confront a cage-level Jinchuriki? Nezumi was glad that he had his mask on, because if he didn't, everyone would have seen the absolutely terrifying smile on his face. The Lord Hokage wishes to end the life of the Yondaime Mizukage. The easiest way for that to happen is if we wake our sleeping comrade. The blonde really loved how his team understood him so. He would have started laughing if he hadn't trained so hard to be capable of keeping his emotions in check. The woman was now really confused. He guessed that she'd never met a monster before. Black Harbor. Terumi May began, as a loyalist-controlled prison. It houses a good portion of our people. Here, an angry expression flashed across the woman's face. The ones the bastard keeps alive. It had only been a few hours since the Team RO contingent met with the resistance, and they were already being put to work. Karasu was indifferent. Saru was annoyed. Neko was ready to serve. And Nezumi was excited. If they could help win the war for the resistance, Kiri, with whoever became the Mizukage, Nezumi thought it would most likely be Mei, would be indebted to Konoha. He was going to have a hand in creating a peaceful alliance for his home and Kiri. He would save so many lives. And take so many more. It was a win-win situation. You want my team to, what, pull off a prison break? Neko asked. She didn't see how this would help them any. Yes, that is exactly what I want of you and your little team. Nezumi could feel that Neko didn't like Mei too much. My top general went in to find information on the whereabouts of Yagura's top weapons manufacturing buildings. The green-eyed woman brushed a stray hair back into one of the 4 bangs that framed her face. I was planning on sending 3 of my teams in, but if what you say about the 2 kiddies is true, then I haven't the need to, now do I? Nezumi could understand why she wasn't Mei's biggest fan. She kind of came off as arrogant, but maybe that was just because she didn't know them all that well. Nezumi wanted to chuckle again. He could play that game if that's what she wanted. No. The smallest out of the Konoha Anbu said, looking at Neko. Let me go in alone, Captain. Ah, there it was. The emotion he was looking for from the auburn-haired woman, incredulous. This doesn't call for the 4 of us. He turned his masked face towards Mei. I should be more than enough. Any more would be overkill. While Terumi was shocked into silence, Neko was mulling it over in her head. Nezumi usually never outright asked for a solo assignment, he was just given them because he was the only person strong enough to take them on. So why was he doing so now? That's when she realized what he was thinking. The resistance didn't trust them, and worse, they thought they weren't capable. That little genius. He had worded it as a suggestion, giving her the authority to make the decision. He knew she was worried that he would try and take over, and to squash those thoughts, he showed she had seniority in front of the others. He also knew that the only way for the resistance to realize just how valuable the team was, they needed to be shown that they were more than capable of fighting the good fight. If the youngest of the group could take down an entire prison filled with enemy combatants, not only would the cell be shown respect, but he'd be showing them Konoha's might. It did everything that both they and Konoha needed all in one go. It still astounded her how the boy was able to think and strategize to win the game with only one move. He truly was the monster he claimed to be. It just took her a while to fully understand what that meant. Permission granted. Neko nodded her head, both in confirmation and thanks. She was sure he could feel her gratitude. Do as you see fit to complete the mission. Nezumi got the message. I agree, and thank you. Yes, Captain. Wait a minute here. Mei finally spoke up. You're really going to just send the one kid? She couldn't believe the boy was as strong as they were implying him to be, she just couldn't. She knew that Konoha was the greatest of the 5, and that they produced child prodigies in bulk, but this was just ridiculous. What the hell did they feed their children in that village? Yes, Nezumi is very special, and more than capable of accomplishing the required task. Neko replied. Don't be so quick to underestimate the ninja of our village. It's far mightier shinobi than you. Nezumi wished he could laugh, that was a good one. And it was the truth, which made it even better. Mei was silent for a moment, her narrowed eyes on the blonde boy. Then she relented. Fine, but if he gets my people killed it's on your heads. Nezumi cocked his head to the right. His suspicions were correct, she was beautiful at every angle. Sarutobi Hiruzen sat at his desk in his office, once again stuck doing paperwork. It really became overwhelming at times if he didn't take much needed breaks. Speaking of much needed breaks, Jiraiya-kun, it's good to see you again. He said to seemingly no one. That's when the aforementioned Sanin seemed to melt out of the wall, his camouflage technique deactivating. Damn, sensei, you're almost as good as the Gaki. Student spoke to teacher, his ever-present smug smirk on his face. You can't fool me yet, Jiraiya, I taught you everything you know after all. The Sandaime made a pouting face. Besides senjutsu. The Sennin roared with laughter. That expression you made doesn't belong on the face of the Hokage, old man. Hiruzen Mock glared at his pupil. Careful, Jiraiya-kun, you're getting pretty old yourself. The sage's laughter immediately stopped. Great, was he really a geezer now? Whatever. Jiraiya mumbled. Where's the gaki? I've got some time before I need to head back out. The white-headed man leaned against the Hokage's desk. Thought I'd get a little training in with him before I leave. Hiruzen shook his head. Naruto-kun is out on a mission, he won't be back for some time. He informed his former student. Jiraiya sighed. Another one? He asked. Do you ever give the kid a break? It was true. Naruto was always out in the field, probably more so than he was in Konoha. His mission count was off the charts, and he hadn't failed a single one yet. He'd been virtually everywhere the elemental nations had to offer, and that was a year ago. His success rate was 100%, something no other before him had accomplished. Jiraiya didn't know if he should be proud or nervous that Minato's son was already able to whip his ass in a spar. Naruto was a true prodigy, a genius among geniuses. He had surpassed many of the world's most powerful men and women by now, and he was only 10, nearing his 11th birthday. He shared the Sandaime's worries of what the young Uzumaki would become in the near future. Hopefully he would stay the same, a loyal Konoha patriot. He enjoys what he does, Jiraiya. The Sandaime said, rubbing his temples with his thumbs. He gets restless if he doesn't serve. He finished. I guess, the Toad Sage mumbled. So, what are you having him do this time? He asked, curious of what the blonde was up to. The tales that he would hear from the Jinchuriki were the stuff you'd tell your children at night. Knights saving princesses, heroes slaying terrible beasts, and, his personal favorite, when the boy got the girl. That was a toned-down version, of course. You couldn't tell your child someone their age was killing and slaughtering his enemies in mass, or how that same child was performing things that could make even grown men sick. And he never really got the girl, he'd just sometimes receive a thankful peck on the cheek or forehead. But Jiraiya digressed. I sent him to Mizu no Kuni. Hiruzen replied. I'm having him deal with the little problem over there. And by little problem, you mean the civil war, don't you? Jiraiya asked. So nothing too different then. Save a country and kill off a repressive tyrant that's gone mad with power. His deadpan was barely concealed. That sounds just peachy. Hiruzen nodded. Indeed. I'm glad you understand. Jiraiya sighed. He really missed his godson. Nezumi now understood why the prison was called Black Harbor. The walls that encased the prison were made of some sort of black material that could withstand several high-ranking ninjutsu, or so Mei would have him believe. Yugura made sure that his prisoners of war had no hope of escape. Take away a person's hope and they might as well be dead. Walking husks of the people they used to be was not a life worth living. The black material was the reason why the prison was so hard to break into. And this so-called impossible feat was what Nezumi was tasked with completing. He first needed to break down the almost unbreakable walls, storm the prison, free the prisoners, and then find and escort this Ao-san back to the base. It was either that or sneak in and do everything covertly, but Nezumi decided to send a message to the Mizukage. We're coming for you. Signed, your friendly Konoha 10-year-old. Taking a moment to pull in the natural energy around him, the change of his eyes from blue to gold marked his entering sage mode. At first, Ero Sennin was astounded that he could enter the enhanced state so quickly. It only took him 10 seconds now. Jiraiya had explained what it was like for him to draw in the world's power. For him, it was like he had to open a door, and then actively pull the chakra in. Nezumi then explained that it felt somewhat similar for him. It was like he had to open the door, but instead of having to consciously pull the energy in, it would instead feel like the natural energy rushed through the door, excited to be reunited with him again. He inspected the structure for a moment, and then decided to just hit it with one of his more powerful techniques and hope for the best. He was almost positive the walls would fall. Nothing should be able to withstand his sage dust techniques. Raising both of his hands into the air, he began to shape natural energy into a tangible form. He was sure that the prison guards knew he was there now if the high-pitched alarms that started going off were anything to go by. It mattered not, he was going to complete his mission. The energy took the shape of a giant golden-shaped warrior that formed around the blonde. He didn't know it at the time, but he was in a way recreating a very rare and powerful Uchiha technique. However, instead of invoking the fabled Susanoo, he called forth something much more befitting a person of his mindset. Bishamon, Nezumi whispered, his voice only heard by the wind. Come forth, so that I may bring about justice to those who would deny the laws of our freedom. With those words said, the spectral, molten gold warrior fully materialized, his full body armor and famed spear present, depicting a much more savage and terrifying visage of the god of war and justice. The spear was held in its left hand. Nezumi needed his right for what he was about to do. Bishamon was topped off with a fiery gold halo, which oddly enough only appeared every other time he summoned the guardian. It briefly passed through his head that he was waking up now. Naruto was who he was at this moment, so he took his mask off, even though both Inu Taicho and Hokage Gigi kept telling him to stop that bad habit, and gave the world a smile in greeting. Uzumaki Naruto, the monster, was awake. He let his arms fall to his sides. He didn't need them anymore. Bishamon did what his mind commanded. He took another second to take in a deep breath, basking in the salt-smelling air. Then, he released his might upon Black Harbor. Senpo. Kami no Migi Te, Sage Art, the right hand of God. He shouted, and within the span of 5 seconds, he rushed the prison walls, let loose the devastating technique, and the black barrier came crumbling down like it was a house of cards. The image of Bishamon smashing his right fist into anything brought a happy smile to Naruto's face, which in this case didn't matter, because he was already smiling at the world. He could hear the terrifying screams of disbelief within his target, and they only excited him more. Dropping the golden warrior, Naruto became incredibly faster, nothing but a yellow and gray blur to the men and women that made up the prison detail. His kunai met many throats in one go, and he was happy that there was so much more left. He unsheathed his tanto, intent on cutting down the 3 men who were preparing a sweetened technique. Before they could reach the last hand seal, he was at their backs, the thin blade piercing flesh. With a single slash, all 3 men fell, gone from this world. While in sage mode, his awareness was heightened to such a degree he practically had eyes in the back of his head. This awareness was to thank when he dove to his right, an absolutely enormous fireball smashing down on his previous location soon after. He took a look at the woman who had tried to turn him into ash and smiled. So she wanted to play with fire, did she? He sheathed the tanto he wore on his back, and held his hands in the tiger sign. He was going to fight fire with fire then. Kaden. Goryuka no Jutsu, fire release, great dragon fire technique. He bellowed, and brought forth a giant dragon-headed fireball that raced at the woman with intent to kill. Her screams were all the confirmation he needed. He repeated the fury with his kunai, ending the lives of 10 more guards, their crimson blood staining his bare face with its warm feeling. He didn't quite like the feeling so much as it was just a reminder that he was doing what he was born to do. He stopped, already done with the set of seals required for the technique he had in mind for the 7 shinobi blocking his path into the prison itself. Futon. Daitapa wind release, great breakthrough. This particular jutsu was only AC rank, but with the amount of chakra that Naruto pumped through it, it could easily be an A rank. As proven when the 7 shinobi stupid enough to block his entrance were cut down with the hurricane force winds that were forced upon them. He was now inside the bleak prison, time to find the control room. 4 minutes and several well-timed Rasengan later, he really needed to thank Jiraiya-sensei for teaching him the Lord Fourth's personal jutsu again. It was one of his favorites now, and he made it to the room he could free the prisoners from. He was disappointed. The enemy was far from satisfying. Ao was spending his time like all the other prisoners at Black Harbor did, miserably. The staff didn't allow them any pleasantries, they had to sit in their cells and rot. The ex-hunter Nin was surprised that they remembered to feed them. That in and of itself was a small miracle with the amount of attention they paid them. He had been stuck in this hellhole called a prison for far too long. He hated himself now for volunteering for this stupid mission. He was just terrified when Mei-sama would mishear him and threaten to take his life. That had been why he volunteered. He had commented on how young the shinobi of Kiri were looking nowadays, and how he remembered back in his day, when he was young and not so old looking, that you'd rarely see someone so young make it into the ranks of the village. That, somehow, translated into him calling the powerful Kunoichi old, and therefore unable to make a man fall in love with her age-riddled body. Ao had no idea where she got that from his little side remark, but the woman had promptly threatened to kill him, and that's how he ended up stuck in here, on his own accord no less. The things he did for his country. That's why, when he heard the alarm bells going off, he had shouted for joy, which was not befitting of a strong man at all. He was just so tired of the nothingness that made up his days for the last 2 months. At least he got the information he came in here for, so that made it, at the very least, worth it. That thrice-damned Yagura was an evil genius. He had constructed a weapons factory underneath the village of Shio, which resided on the farthest of the southern islands. It was going to be a pain in the backside for the resistance to get to, it being so deep in Yagura's territory and all. They'd need the backing of several powerful shinobi, which they possessed, but the casualties would almost make it not worth the trouble. Unless they somehow convinced another village to assist them, Ao was thinking that the weapons factory would remain untouched for a good while now. Not long after the alarm was raised did his cell door open, the resistance did an excellent job with this one. He thought Mei-sama would send 3, maybe 4, teams to extract him, but the speed at which he was released from his cell would make him believe she'd sent 6 or 7. Did he really mean that much to her? His delusions were severed when he heard the young male voice call his name. Ao-san. The blue, moosed-up-haired man turned to where he could hear the voice. I'm looking for an Ao-san. Does anyone know where Ao of the resistance is? Why was there a child calling his name? You there, boy? Ao called out, wanting to know what was going on. Where were the teams that broke him out? I am Ao of the resistance, what is it that you need? He emitted an annoyed feeling. Why was there a boy looking for him? Ah, so you're Ao-san. Good. Mei-san has sent me here to retrieve you. He sighed. But I guess we don't have very far to go though. Ao raised an eyebrow. Why would Mei-sama? He put extra emphasis on the proper way to address the powerful woman, send a child, to Black Harbor of all places, with the retrieval team. He asked, confusion lacing his words. The boy scratched the back of his head. I am the retrieval team. He laughed somewhat sheepishly. It's just me. Ao was silent for a long moment, an owlish look on his face. Did he just hear that correctly? Did this young blonde boy just claim to do what he thought 7 teams had done? Was he claiming to have broken into Black Harbor, taken out all of the guards, and then set him, along with everyone else being held captive, free by his lonesome? He was so shocked that he missed the boy's slightly chuckle. He didn't know it yet, but Naruto could feel how astonished and disbelieving the Kiri nin was. Come, your commander is closer than she should be. It was Naruto's time to be annoyed. Did the woman truly underestimate Konoha? They were the strongest military force in the elemental nations for a reason. Ao nodded dumbly and followed the boy he just realized was a Konoha Anbu of all things. Was the leaf really so far ahead of Kiri that their children outstripped experienced Jonin? When the boy identified as Nezumi left with the guide who was to escort him to Black Harbor, Mei had followed shortly after. She had taken a small team with her too, so when the boy realized that he wasn't as strong as he thought he was, she could step in and do what needed to be done. What she had witnessed truly opened her eyes to how outclassed they were compared to Konoha. The blonde had first whispered something that no one present could hear, and that's when that thing showed up. She wasn't a very religious person, but even she knew of the god of war and justice, And when she saw the child, if he could still even be called one, not only summon him, but command him, she had been terrified. One strike from the golden god collapsed the unbreakable walls, and that's when the boy began his massacre. The first batch of shinobi that he encountered was run through like butter with a simple kunai. He had no trouble at all, it seemed, with nothing more than that. Then he had used the tanto strapped to his back to cut down 3 guards so quickly even she couldn't make it out. When she saw the giant fireball crashing down on him from his blind spot, she had thought it was over. That's when the boy dove out of the way. Apparently, he didn't have such a thing as a blind spot. The dragon-like head he spit at the woman responsible for the flames that almost toasted him was all it took to end her life. May couldn't believe that a child was so good at killing. And the smile on his face while he did these things unnerved her. He then went back to a simple kunai to the throat method, taking out at least 10 more enemies. After he was blocked by what looked like to be 7 shinobi, he unleashed an absolutely ridiculous amount of force in the form of a futon jutsu. When he had entered the prison, all she could hear were the screams of the men and women that made up the prison guard and small explosions. She saw all of the prisoners, some she recognized, some she did not, fleeing the carcass-covered grounds of the confines. Shortly after, the blonde, alongside Ao, made their way right for her. She wasn't surprised he knew, she wouldn't doubt the boy ever again. Team RO had earned her absolute respect. Before the two could make it to her and the few shinobi she took with her, the boy stopped and turned, telling Ao something she couldn't hear. When her general nodded a bit confusedly, she didn't know what to expect next. Ao made it to her and saw her confused expression. He said he didn't like the prison. Ao whispered. So he's going to raze it to the ground, he finished, somewhat hesitant of his own words. At that moment, the whisker-faced boy, which she now found to be both adorable and frightening at the same time, brought his arms into the air once again. The gold substance that his last attack was made of formed again, and with a shout of, Tenmei, heaven's decree. Black Harbor was flattened out of existence by a huge beam of golden light from the sky. Terumi May had just witnessed the most terrifying thing in her still young life. She had seen a child of Konoha, no older than 10 she guessed, completely decimate an enemy stronghold by himself. She'd remember that day for the rest of her life. That day, she had witnessed it. The might of Konoha. I sometimes wonder if my talents are nothing more than a curse. Why was I, someone so young, given the ability to understand things with such clarity? Time and time again, I find myself regretting the power I was given. Why me? The need to be a monster grows more and more with each passing day. The more I try, the more I find ways that I am what I claim to be. Be it mentally, physically, or spiritually. So why is it that I usually end up a hero? At the end of the day, I ask myself these very questions, and reply with the very same answer. Who cares? I am a monster, be it Nezumi or Naruto. And every day, I become more and more okay with it. When May returned to where Neko and her team were on standby, the young blonde that accompanied her was now Nezumi. He'd had his fun. It was time to put the mask back on and act like he wasn't a monster. Neko smirked under her porcelain mask. The way the leader of the resistance kept glancing at her Kahai told her all she needed to know. The woman had witnessed, with her own 2 eyes, the power Konoha had at its beck and call. Good. Now they'd pay attention to what her and her team said. Ah, the benefits of knowing a monster. I take it Nezumi was more than efficient in proving that you have been given 4 operatives who are more than capable of fighting the Mizukage's forces. Neko said somewhat smugly. Having May actually say that her Kahais were only worth half an agent really bothered her, and to see how the woman reacted to Nezumi's actions made her feel more than a little smug. Nezumi knew as much, even without his abilities to feel others. Her tone said it all. Ah, the benefits of being a monster. Indeed, May finally said reluctantly. I'll make sure not to underestimate you or your team again. She bit out. You have my word. The woman actually looked to be in pain, sorry. There. She said it. Now it was time to move on and forget it. She would be hard-pressed to admit that she was wrong and apologize to a Konoha nin again. She loathed having to do it a first time. Apology accepted, Mei-san. Karasu replied with a respectable nod of his head. You didn't know if you could put your faith in us. Wow, this was the most the auburn-haired woman had heard the black-haired boy speak the whole time he'd been with the resistance. Now you know you can. Mei nodded slowly. Having children talking to you like they were adults would take some getting used to, if she could ever get used to it. Really, what was that village feeding its youth? Did your general get the information he was tasked with recovering? Neko asked, wanting to know if Nezumi had been used for nothing or not. For the purple-haired woman, breaking people out who were already defeated and imprisoned wasn't the best way to spend their time. She hadn't planned to spend too horribly long in this war-torn country. She had a special someone waiting for her at home after all. Yes. A blue-haired man finally spoke up. The factory is underneath Shio. Ao revealed. That bastard stuck it somewhere impossible for us to get to without losing too many of our own. Mei's fist hit the earth-made wall. Damn it. She all but snarled. He really doesn't want to lose that damn place. She ran a hand through her long hair and sighed. We really needed to hit that base. It's our greatest way to cripple his armies. Neko thought it was a smart idea. Taking out the man's weapons factory would slowly make his men's supply dwindle down, causing more of them to lose battles with the resistance, not having the equipment to properly fight back. More deaths would lessen morale, which would then cause even more deaths. It was slow and subtle, but it was a smart move. The smallest of bug bites could fall a giant, and Team RO knew it. Nezumi was practically the epitome of that very saying. Very small. And very deadly. Very. Saru looked at Neko, a silent request to speak. He was given it in the form of a nod. Mei-san, if I may, I have a proposal you should consider. Nezumi smirked. Saru might not be very lazy, or constantly spam the word troublesome, like the rest of his clan, but the pineapple-shaped hair was a dead giveaway. The man was a Nara, through and through. And no other clan in the world could claim to be more tactically and strategically proficient than the deer-herding clan of Konoha. Nezumi turned his gaze to Mei and smirked under his mask when he felt her nervousness. Mei-san, he began, Saru is our team's greatest strategist. You should take whatever he says serious. He felt Saru's gratitude at the kind words. It could help liberate your country. Mei nodded, not wanting to argue with the boy's words. She had underestimated the small cell from Konoha once already, and that had proven to be a bad idea. What is it you wish to suggest? She asked him genuinely. She wanted her home out from underneath Yagura's cruel reign more than anything. If she had to play nice with the leaf, then she would. Her ego meant little if her people continued to stain the shores red. Mizu was more than ready to leave war behind and enter the nice long vacation that was peace. Too many innocents had died already. Saru once again glanced at Neko for approval. After seeing Nezumi show her so much respect, he would be damned before he showed her anything but the same. His age didn't matter. The blonde boy was Saru's hero. After receiving another movement of his captain's head to continue, the Nara Anbu operative began to explain the plans he had created in the seconds he had heard them bring up the problem they were facing. He knew it was a good idea to familiarize himself with the geography of Mizu no Kuni before leaving for the mission. That, added to his already brilliant mind, was truly nothing to laugh at. He wondered if this made him what Nezumi called a monster. He sure hoped so. After his explanation was finished, Neko and Mei were confused when they saw Saru staring at the base's ceiling, obviously lost in his own thought, and Nezumi nodding slowly at said monkey-faced man in an approving manner. Why did the blonde have both of his thumbs up? Did they miss something? Karasu, like always, was watching the happenings with indifference. Nezumi sighed in content when he fell down on the bed Mei had said he was free to use, both mask and shirt forgotten on the floor. It was the most comfortable thing the young agent had felt in a long time. The ANBU's commendations were meant to be functional and nothing more. Comforting things apparently dulled the senses. Nezumi thought it was such a load of bull. He loved Hokage Gigi, He did, but the man was such a cheapskate. Another sigh left his small lips. The bed really was comfortable. He had a whole 10 hours to rest his body for tomorrow's assignment, which relied heavily on him and Karasu. The rest was very welcome. The young blonde was a juggernaut in many cases, stamina being one of them, but even he got tired. The small team had only stopped twice in the 3-day trip to Mizu no Kuni. They didn't even take a boat. Neko had the team run the entire ocean that lay in between Water Country and High no Kuni. Afterwards, he had been sent to single-handedly take out an entire prison. Yes, he had volunteered to do so, but that was a moot point. The resistance needed to be shown what they were given. He was the only one who could show them properly. So when the beautiful woman had accepted Saru's plans and shown them to where they would be sleeping for the majority of the time they were in Mizu, after the small tour of the subterranean base, the blonde had been more than thrilled. When she revealed that they had separate rooms, he had been surprised. The woman must have been really impressed by his actions, because now she was treating them almost like royalty. He may have been over-exaggerating though, because even lower-class citizens had their own rooms and beds. But it had been years since he moved into Anbu HQ, and the small closet that was considered a room and the paper-thin mat he slept on was beginning to get old. He willed his eyes open, his Anbu training not letting him fall asleep until he inspected the room he was in. Even though he knew they wouldn't turn against them, the years of training had drilled into his brain that non-Konoha shinobi were always the enemy. He was in an average-sized room, the same color as the earth it was made from. The bed took up a lot of the space, being 4 times the size of his mat back home. Now that he thought about it, it was a bit strange. Why did he have a king-sized bed? There were 2 medium-sized nightstands on each side of him, both having random things thrown on them like someone used them regularly, also confusing. The right side of the room had what Nezumi thought to be a walk-in closet. He couldn't tell from his position propped up on his elbows, but he would wager that it was full with someone's clothing. He didn't know why, but it seemed like he was given someone else's room. It could have been on accident, or maybe the person was gone for the night or was no longer with the resistance. Whatever the reason may be, he didn't really care at the moment. He was exhausted and ready to drift off into slumber for the remaining time he had left for relaxation. In his tired state, he had forgotten to check on his team's position, like he always did when he was out of the village with comrades. Not 5 minutes after he had closed his eyes to try and relax did the door to his temporary room slide open. His eyes opened and he went upright. Of course he had to accidentally be given someone else's room, nothing could just be easy, could it? Before he could sit up completely, he was gently pushed back down into the soft sheets of the bed covers. "Where do you think you're going, cutie?" A female voice purred in his ear. He immediately recognized the voice as Terumi Mei, the leader of the resistance. If he couldn't feel the emotions of the woman, he would already have killed her 3 times over by now. He'd never been so grateful of his abilities. "I was going to go find myself a new room to sleep in," he replied with a perfect poker face. He couldn't afford to show emotion and give her the wrong idea. "This one obviously belongs to you." Mei tightened her grip on the boy's shoulder. Don't be so quick to leave a woman when she hasn't said what she wants to say." She purred in his ear again. He wondered if she actually thought she trapped him. She had to know by now that he was stronger than her, in every way possible. "It's just rude," she added after he was silent. Her body and warmth did feel good. He may only be 10, but he was still able to admire the female body. It is a wonderful thing after all. "And what is it you wish to discuss, Mei-san?" he asked politely. He knew how to keep calm and collected, even in a situation like this one. He tried his best to ignore when she pressed her substantial bust against his chest sensually, their faces so close he could feel her breath hit his warm flesh. "You seem to be a very mature young man, Nezumi-san," she replied, adding the respectable honorific to his codename for the first time since his arrival. "You must have been with a woman by now, even if you are so young," she continued, now rubbing her chest against his. "Am I correct?" She asked, giving off the feeling that she thought she was right. You would be wrong, Mei-san. He eventually said. I am still very much a virgin. He added clinically, talking like he was speaking about the weather or something else just as unimportant. The woman's purr was absolutely sensational. Ah, so I'd be the first to taste this incredibly yummy-looking flesh then. She licked the boy's bare neck. Good. Naruto sighed. He really hated to have to do this. He took her wrist into his hand, gently guiding it away from his body. I'm sorry, Mei-san, but I cannot sleep with you. He sighed again. He really hated his abilities sometimes. I feel I am too young at this time to have love. He pulled her other hand off his body. I hope you can understand. He finished, sighing once more. Mei pouted. Don't be like that, cutie, it's normal for shinobi to have love at young ages. Our lives aren't very long. She tried to reason with the boy. It was true, too, shinobi weren't guaranteed to live long in their line of work, and so releasing some of their tension through making love was a common occurrence. Still, Nezumi was 10, and most 10-year-olds didn't even know what love was, never mind be interested in it. The Uzumaki really hated that he wasn't like most 10-year-olds at times. Right now being the case in point. It wasn't that he didn't want to sleep with her, because he did, he really did. It wasn't even because he was embarrassed about the size of his equipment, because he really wasn't. If anything, he was proud of his size actually. For a 10-year-old, for any age actually, he was more than adequate. He didn't know that he had his Uzumaki blood to thank for that not-so-small gift from God. It really only came down to two things, one being the main reason for his refusal of sleeping with the beautiful woman. The first and less important reason was that she was still a Kiri nin, even if she was trying to bring the current Mizukage down. That didn't really count though, Yugura was an ass who needed to die. The second and most prominent reason was the obvious one, his age. He had no childish thoughts about the act, he knew exactly what it was and was curious about it ever since he first understood what it was many years ago, which is why he was hating his abilities at the moment. He just didn't really want to lose his virginity at 10. It was just a personal preference, was all. I know exactly what you mean, Mei. He left the san part out of her name. They seemed to be very personal at the moment and weren't in the presence of others. If I was a little older then I would have happily taken you up on your offer. He tried to reassure her. He could feel her disappointment. If it's about your size then worry not. Mei started, reaching under the covers and his pants at the waistline. There are plenty of other ways to pleasure someone, size doesn't matter all that much to me. She was telling the truth, Nezumi could tell. I won't tease you, Anything she was about to say was cut off when she had the surprisingly large manhood that belonged to the boy grasped in her hand. Okay. That's just not fair, the auburn-haired woman thought when she recovered from her shock. Nezumi did chuckle this time. Yup. He really was a monster, through and through. He again grabbed her arm, taking her hand out of his pants and releasing her grip on his member. That's not what I'm worried about, he said rather smugly. The look and feeling of shock and disbelief on her face was completely worth letting her grab a handful of what was between his legs. I honestly think that I am too young for love. When he felt that she finally believed him, he was relieved. He didn't want to offend her. She wasn't the reason he didn't want to have love. He just wanted to wait before he started that chapter in his life. Her next pout was genuine. After knowing what the boy was packing, he couldn't really blame her. Such a shame, she sighed, getting out of the bed and walking into the closet for a moment. I really was looking forward to getting to know you better. She called out from the closet. She walked out a short moment later in a rather revealing nightgown. Oh well, I guess you can't have everything you want, she said softly, slipping into the covers next to him. Before he could get out from underneath the covers to leave the room and look for another place to lay his head, slim arms wrapped around his torso, pulling him into their owner's embrace. Mei, he began, slightly confused when the woman's legs wrapped around his own. She was successfully spooning him now. What are you doing? He didn't mind it too much, He just didn't appreciate being the little spoon. You said you didn't want to have love with me. She began. And I respect that, I do. She continued. But if you think I'm going to spend the rest of the night alone after feeling your warmth, you're sadly mistaken. She finished with a happy smile. Nezumi had the same smile on his face. He would be okay with that. Having someone to sleep with, actually sleep, was always the best way to do it. The warmth was a constant reminder that you weren't alone. The blonde had only shared a bed once before with a client he spent the night with in a cave 3 months ago. They had been forced to take shelter for the night, and the teenage girl had asked him if she could share a bedroll with him. He could feel that she was scared and was only seeking warmth and company, so he had given the girl what she wanted. He found he rather enjoyed it. And in case you decide you want to take my body in the night, feel free to do so. She purred into the back of his neck. Please, she added in a sensual manner, causing the boy to shiver. Damn, she found a way to get at him. He needed to find a way at her now. He smirked. She really didn't know what she was getting into. He was a monster, but he was a pranking god as well, and he knew a challenge when he saw one. Let the games begin. When Neko had woke up next to both Karasu and Saru in the small room the resistance gave them for their stay in Mizu no Kuni, she had been slightly sore. The room was very small, just barely able to fit the three of them. She didn't know where Nezumi had spent the night, but she wasn't too worried, the boy could take care of himself. Her only real problem was when Saru's hand not so accidentally landed on her body during the night, near her chest region. That pervert. She didn't mind sleeping next to Karasu, the young boy she knew to be an Uchiha. Everyone knew who he was a perfect gentleman, allowing her to take the bedding with the most padding. Saru, however, was a different story altogether. She didn't like sharing a sleeping area with him at all. She didn't need to be up so early, she had another hour before she needed to get up, but she was always an early bird. She liked to get up and train a little in Kenjutsu, just like Hayate-kun had told her she should, even if she was in another country. When she made it to the training grounds, Mei had shown her and the team the previous night. She wasn't at all surprised to see Nezumi, now clad in full Anbu gear, there before her. What did surprise her was that he wasn't alone. One Terumi Mei was currently sparring with her youngest comrade. From what she could tell, it was taijutsu only, but like everything else the boy did, he was the dominant one. To the auburn-haired woman's credit, she was holding her own pretty well. She was keeping up at the very least. That just showed that the woman was as powerful as they said she was. She went blow for blow with the blonde, but Neko could tell that he was holding back, quite a lot, too. Mei obviously wasn't going all out either, but she was trying harder than the boy just to keep up. She could see the woman's playful smirk, she was enjoying the spar a little too much. What exactly happened while her Kahai was gone during the night? She had the feeling that if he didn't have his mask on, she'd see the same playful look on Nezumi's face. Why were the two so chummy? A right jab from Mei was blocked and then used against her to throw the woman to the ground. It was a clean and precise move, executed perfectly. What came after it was not so professional. The boy actually straddled the powerful kunoichi and bent down so that his mask was dangerously close to her face. Words that Neko couldn't hear were passed between the two, causing the woman to actually blush, and then squirm out of his grasp. It was for naught though, his physical strength far surpassed hers, and she was firmly stuck. The temporary Rohan captain could hear the boy laugh before he let her out of his intimate hold. She coughed to announce her presence, which she knew was not necessary. With the boy's sensory capabilities he knew where everyone in the whole base was, but she did it anyways. She knew he could feel her uncomfortableness with the whole extremely close contact that he was sharing with the leader of the resistance, but she still thought it best to voice her opinion. He was 10 for crying out loud. Before she could open her mouth to say anything, however, he glanced over his shoulder at her, giving her a silent warning that he knew she would receive. I'll follow your orders, but do not forget who I am. Message received. Neko's mouth firmly shut, not wanting to risk her command for something she really had no say in. Neko Taicho, Nezumi-senpai. She heard Saru greet them as he walked into the training room. She had never been so grateful to see the perverted Nara in her life. Looks like we all got up a little early then, he said, Karasu walking in shortly after the words left the monkey's mouth, giving everyone present a respectful nod of his head in greeting. Nezumi gave Karasu a nod in greeting of his own. It would seem so, the blonde replied, now standing at a proper distance from Mei. He had let Neko see their close and friendlier relationship only so that the team's captain knew everything that she needed to know. He wasn't going to give her any details, not only because there wasn't really anything to give, but even if there was, it was none of her business. What he did in his private time was his and his alone to know. His age aside, he was considered an adult by shinobi standards, having become one the moment he was assigned to the Anbu. He didn't really want the others to know though. Karasu would most likely not care, but that was beside the point. He and the Uchiha liked to keep their private lives private. Saru was the one he didn't want to find out. The man would never let him live it down, and he was positive the rest of Team RO would know of his conquest, which wasn't the truth, shortly after the Nara caught wind of it. He had no delusions that his team wouldn't believe he turned down someone like Mei, so he decided to keep it quiet. Well, Mei spoke up, picking up a towel and handing it to Nezumi. I'm going to go wash off. She then took her own towel and wiped off the sweat from her brow. She bent down and whispered into the blonde's ear, so that only he could hear her. If you'd like to join me, you know where my room is. The woman was trying to mess with him again. Nezumi smirked under his mask. Sounds wonderful, he whispered back, enjoying her surprised pause. I'll meet you there in a few minutes, he added, feeling both her shock and excitement. He was looking right at her, but his face mask was blocking his mischievous smirk. It took her a few moments, but she finally realized that he wasn't being serious. Damn, he had gotten her good that time. He was obviously more skilled in the art of subtle, or maybe not so subtle, teasing. It was a good thing she liked the boy. If any other man tried to speak to her the way he now did, she would have melted his face off with her yoden. Or so she told herself. Denial was something she didn't have much experience with. She, deep down, knew that she could never harm the boy, even if she wanted to. He was on a different level than anyone she had ever seen before. Mei gave the blonde a look that said he won this round and walked away, making sure to sway her hips more than necessary, which both Nezumi and Neko didn't miss. That woman is hot with a capital H. Apparently Saru didn't miss it either. Karasu chuckled lightly. The Uchiha knew who that little display of provocative walking was for. It didn't surprise him either. Nezumi was just the kind of person that people of all ages liked, in more ways than one. Let us spar for the remaining time we have, Neko said, getting the attention of the three males she had under her command at the moment. We don't want to dull our senses. That little remark forced Nezumi to remember Mei's offer last night. He really wished he was older and more prepared. Ah well, there would always be plenty fish in the sea later. And who knows, when he did age a little more, he might just get the offer for love from the auburn-haired woman again. A monster could dream, despite popular beliefs. After the hour of training, the Konoha Anbu team found themselves in the large room they first entered upon their arrival to Mizu no Kuni. Sitting on one side of the large meeting table was Terumi Mei and Ao, on the other was Neko and Nezumi. Both Karasu and Saru were standing, letting their senpais sit as a sign of their seniority. It was strange to most of the resistance. They all knew that Nezumi was the youngest, yet the boy had seniority over two older operatives. Word had already spread around the resistance in the short time Nezumi had returned from Black Harbor of his actions. A lone boy had crushed the Kiri prison with ease, and that very boy was a Konoha nin sent with 3 others to assist them with their cause. The people finally had another hero, Mei being their first, to look up to. Hope was slowly returning to the hearts of the resistance, and it had been no more than 16 hours since the Anbu arrived. After Mei had seriously considered Saru's plan, she had concluded that it was brilliant and simple. It wouldn't have worked, however, if everything he said that needed to fall in place didn't happen, or the super powerful blonde wasn't with them. Fortunately, and rather amazingly, everything that the monkey-masked agent had said was necessary, did in fact occur. Mei was beginning to believe that all of Konoha's shinobi were in some way terrifying. The strategic thought process of the operative who came off as a pervert was absolutely mind-blowing. The fact that his plan was incredibly simple and completely ingenious at the same time made the woman's head hurt. The plan was as follows: have Nezumi and Karasu attack several of Yagura's bases on every island physically possible in the span of a week. And, like Saru knew his senpai would do at Black Harbor, allow 3 or 4 Kiri loyalists return to the Mizukage to report what was happening. Once word had reached Kiri and its forces that children were responsible for the fall of so many outposts, not only would it lower morale, it would get the attention of the man they were sent to kill. Once Yagura was given so many reports of mere children destroying his forces slowly, he would be forced to intervene personally, falling right into the trap that was laid out for him. Once he was in Nezumi's sight, he would soon be gone from this world. It was simple. It was elementary. It was, in Saru's words, untroublesome. Nezumi said he didn't spam the word, not that it was banned from his vocabulary. It would also allow the resistance ample time to prepare for what was to come after the week-long havoc spree. The destruction of the weapons factory would commence a few days afterward, and with that, added to all of the other chaos caused by the young Anbu agents, the resistance would take their first real step in winning the war. Mei was overjoyed. Mizu no Kuni was so close to freedom and equality for all her people she could practically taste it. It was only a matter of time now, and not much of it. She really needed to find a proper way of thanking Konoha for sending her the knight in shining armor that went by the codename Nezumi. So, we all know what our assignments are, right? Mei asked, getting nods from all present. Good. Her voice was low but everyone could hear her with clarity. Let's send our enemies straight to hell. She finished with a smirk that Nezumi knew all too well. She had found her inner monster. The following week had gone off without a hitch. Nezumi and Karasu had been going from base to base, raising them all to the ground like it was a holy crusade. They were alone, the rest of the Rohan contingent staying with the resistance, helping to prepare for the raid that was to come. It never ceased to amaze Nezumi how efficient Karasu was when in battle. The Uchiha was only 13 and he was the closest to Nezumi out of the 4 that were with him in strength. The blonde realized that he couldn't really say anything when it came to someone's age, him being 10 and all, but he was a special case. He was born with a power no one before him possessed. Yes, there were other Sennin, but none of them were born so closely intertwined with natural energy like he was. So, for Karasu to show such prowess, with only the Sharingan to aid him, was no small feat. Nezumi could feel his closest friend's heart. The boy was a pacifist, only taking lives so that he could protect his village. In a way, they were alike. Nezumi only enjoyed being a monster to protect his village. He didn't like to cause the innocent suffering. He was in a country torn by war to stop that very thing right now. He didn't like to hurt the weak or helpless either. He only enjoyed killing when the men and women he killed deserved it. People like Yagura, whom he was planning on adding to his already large and still growing body count. Where they differed though, was that Karasu never enjoyed killing, ever. He only did so as a means to an end. He knew the act of killing was an important factor in a shinobi's life, and he dealt with it instead of complaining. There were only a handful of shinobi that the Hokage could trust completely to do anything he ordered unconditionally, and Karasu was one of them. So they traversed the islands that made up Mizu no Kuni, bringing down to the ground any Kiri bases they could find. With Nezumi's extremely large sensory field, it was uncomplicated. Actually taking out the bases was like child's play. Without Karasu, Nezumi could have brought them down almost effortlessly. With him, the blonde almost felt depressed at the ease they were able to finish their task. Mei was telling the truth when she described the Mizukage's plan for overwhelming the resistance. Team RO had been told that much of Yagura's armies were made up of very, very green genin. The man with questionable sanity had been promoting unready aspiring shinobi, the kind of people no sane cage would ever let into their ranks, to Genin so that he could fill the empty spots the resistance made in his forces. He was giving weapons to men and women, boys and girls, who had no business being a shinobi in the first place. They couldn't even use them properly for God's sake. It was sad, and it angered Nezumi to no end. The kind of person it took to send his people in the slaughterhouse like cattle was the kind of person that the young Anbu agent liked, loved, to kill. His Hokage knew of this as well, and the wrath that was the god of shinobi was already in Mizu no Kuni, in the form of one Nezumi masked Anbu operative. The man never should have touched a High no Kuni citizen. He would die for that now. Konoha would have her vengeance. Nezumi. Karasu suddenly spoke. This will be our last target before we have to return. He finished, his voice only audible to the blonde. Even though they were friends, the two hardly ever shared words. It was like a silent friendship, each knowing what the other thought of them. In Nezumi's case, he actually did know what the Uchiha felt. Nezumi replied. He already knew as much. The week had been a slow one and the blonde couldn't wait to return to the resistance. Mei had told him that when he returned, he was welcome to sleep in her bed with her again. She had enjoyed his company, too. Nezumi couldn't wait. They could see their target in the distance. Karasu activated his Sharingan. The walls were a light shade of gray. The exterior was reinforced with metals, 3 different kinds. The guard's tower had 2 men inside it. Both were of short stature, no older than 20 if their complexion was anything to go by. 15 traps set, they were getting nervous. Good. Inside the fortress, the walls were made up of some kind of hardened clay and wood. Flammable. The ground was nothing but earth. Good. The cobblestone they saw in the markets would have been inconvenient. Conclusion. It's going to be just as easy as the other 80. All of this happened in the time span of 3 seconds. Itachi had mastery over the Sharingan most adult Uchiha couldn't hope to accomplish. Time to work. Karasu could see Nezumi take off his mask in his peripherals. The vicious smirk on his face told him all he needed to know. Naruto was awake. The monster was off its leash. Time to play. You two were able to take out 81 bases in a week. Ao sputtered unintelligently. He was stricken with shock and awe. That many bases would have taken the resistance months to complete. These Konoha Anbu were terrifyingly effective. Correct. Ao-san. Karasu replied. 81 Kiri-controlled outposts or no more. He clarified, the man's facial expression slightly amusing him. Neko gave a short nod. Good. Now that we're so close to being ready to hit the factory in Shio, all of this should be finished up within the next week. It couldn't happen too soon either. She really missed her boyfriend. Yes. Mei sighed contently. And Mizu no Kuni will no war no more. The huge, heartwarming smile on the woman's face even made Nezumi smile. He was glad that he could help these people out in their time of suffering, they deserved it. When the blonde thought about it, he realized how absurd it all was. A monster was the hero, setting a land free and saving its people. Ah well, nothing about him was normal, might as well live in irony. Mei-sama, a woman Nezumi didn't recognize appeared from the entrance of the hideout. A man is here claiming to be Jiraiya of the Sannin. The woman reported. He's here to speak with the Konoha Anbu. She finished, giving Mei a deep bow before vanishing again. Mei raised an eyebrow. Did Konoha send a Sannin to help me as well? She asked Neko with an incredulous expression. Nezumi thought he felt his fellow sage. It would seem so. The blonde replied for his captain, already making his way to the entrance. He hadn't seen his sensei in a long time now. Are you sure it's him? Neko asked, also confused as to why the Hokage would send someone as renowned as the legendary Toad Sage to a place such as this. The man may be the most perverted human being alive, but he was still shown the highest form of respect, even from women, at times. He was a hero, an extremely powerful and, at times, wise man who helped in the last 2 great shinobi world wars. It's him, Nezumi said excitedly. I'd recognize my old arrow sennin anywhere. Mei giggled. This was the first time she'd seen Nezumi act, even if only a little, childish. It was a welcome sight. It reminded her that he was still human, capable of things besides death and destruction. The blonde disappeared into the small tunnel that led to the hut above, and when he returned, sure enough, the aforementioned Sanin was with him. Neko, Karasu, and Saru all immediately bowed their heads. Lord Jiraiya. Neko greeted. She was in the presence of a living legend. The man gave them a nod, allowing them to rise. So, the Sanin said, taking a moment to look around the underground base. What are you up to now, kid? Ah, you know, just a little mission Gigi wants done. What about you? Everyone present sweat dropped. He was speaking so casually about something so important to someone so legendary, like it was the most natural thing in the world, not to mention his completely disrespectful way of addressing the leader of Konoha. You better not be here for your research, Arrow Senin. In case you haven't noticed, we're kind of busy with a war right now. He added, narrowing his eyes at the older man underneath his mask. Jiraiya waved his hand in a dismissive manner. Nothing like that, kid. He replied, smiling at his godson. I just thought I'd come and see how you were doing. I haven't seen you in a while, you know. He finished, using his large hand to mess up the boy's hair. Nezumi swatted the hand that was attacking his already messy hair away, mumbling something about old perverts. Well, since you're here, you can help us on our next assignment. The blonde said with a smirk. You can have a hand in freeing Mizu. Mei took this as a way to enter the conversation. That would be wonderful, Jiraiya-sama. That was her first mistake. With the help of both Nezumi and yourself, the resistance is sure to win. Because now the pervert saw what a beauty she was. Oh ho! Jiraiya shouted, steam seeming to rush out of his nose. And what do we have here? His voice was now annoying Nezumi. Such a beautiful woman as you should be sitting on a throne with a crown on her head, not in a place like this. He used his hands to gesture to the earth-made base. That was his first mistake. Nezumi was about to say something about him leaving her alone when the auburn-haired woman seemed to glide towards him. I made this comfortable base, Jiraiya-san. She said in a sickly sweet voice, causing the Senin to shiver. Are you trying to say that I am not proficient with Doden? Jiraiya gulped. Nezumi chuckled before he rescued his terrified sensei. Mei-san, we need him alive so that he can help us when it's time for the raid. Mei sighed, but relented. Thanks, kid, one Senin whispered to another. Nezumi shook his head. When was his sensei ever going to learn? So, the crazy bastards sent their heads to sensei then, Jiraiya repeated with his voice now serious. When he became like this, like the respectable veteran shinobi that he was, everyone paid attention to him. That sounds like something sensei would send someone like you to retaliate for. Naruto. His mask was off and he was able to truly be himself in front of the man who had familial feelings for him, nodded his head in agreement. He knew he was the Sandame's top operative by now, up there with Inu Taicho and Karasu. Whenever there was an important issue that needed to be handled, with a 100% guarantee of success, Naruto was the person to be sent, especially when it came to missions that involved a lot of destruction and mayhem. Yagura tried to play games with Gigi, which was not something he should have done. Naruto replied, rubbing the back of his head absent-mindedly. He'll soon know the consequences of his foolish actions. He finished, stretching his back with a resounding pop. Death to those who purposely try to harm Konoha or her citizens. Jiraiya finished what his godson was implying. Naruto nodded, making his way to the door where he paused and looked back at the white-haired man. Hell hath no fury, he whispered before leaving Jiraiya's personal room. He was tired, and he couldn't wait so share a bed with the beautiful kunoichi named Terumi Mei again. The blonde's unfinished sentence was left to the breeze inside the base. Like a woman scorned, Konoha being the now bloodthirsty woman.